Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
My guest today is Jonathan Beamer, the CMO of Monster. I'm sure you've heard of it, a role he assumed in December 2017. In prepping for this interview, and now that may surprise some of you that I actually do prep for the interviews because it seems like I'm sort of winging it most of the time, but I came across a number of stories quoting Jonathan while with breathtaking honesty about the changes that needed to be made at Monster to bring it out of its .com era quagmire. And these are sort of some, I'm paraphrasing words that he's used. Anyway, we'll be talking about the increasing trend towards fessing up about past missteps, an approach that was embraced by Domino's quite successfully and more recently by Wells Fargo. It'll be interesting to see how that one rolls out. But this sort of warts and all approach, I think is fascinating and certainly has reflects, I have to say, sort of the distrust that brands are sort of facing and the trust that they're trying to build, and that sort of maybe if we're a little bit more honest, a little bit more human, we can be a little bit more successful. So anyway, with that long-winded introduction, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Drew. It's an honor to be here. Thanks so much.
So, by the way, it's sort of coincidentally, I happen to be talking to your associate, Matt Ferguson, today, which is just it's coincidental because he and I are doing a sort of roundtable conversation with the CMO Club in early September. So he assured me that you would be dropping at least one F-bomb on the show.
Well, I think I just listened to your box.com, and so there's good precedence for potentially using more colorful language. So we'll see.
Yes, there is, and I don't want you to feel restrained by that. And yes, that episode, Jeremiah, his show, Jackson. His last name is Jeremiah. It's very hard to pronounce. But anyway, he was amazing. And it was funny, you two have very common backgrounds in that you bring it up because both of you had strong agency side background before you went client side. So did you like that episode, by the way?
I did. I very much so. And it's good to see more migration between a life in the agency world, and then sometimes at some point coming to your senses and actually owning responsibility for the marketing. Well,
it's funny you should say that because I really, when after listening to that, or recording that episode with Jackson, I sort of felt like, oh my God, you know what? He is so right that careers done differently, going client side, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you really want to control marketing, you can't do it on the agency side. So, but we covered that on his show. And on this show, we have something completely different to talk about. But before we do that, let's move to Renegade Rapid Fire. So, are you ready?
As ready as I'm going to be. Let's see how this goes.
All right. So, what is your definition of marketing?
Marketing changes hearts and minds to cultivate actions that drive business outcomes.
Driving. Okay.
And it's interesting because I think that can be anywhere from navigational, right? So if you think about search engine marketing, hey, you're looking for something, come look for it here at my company. But ideally, we're operating a higher level, right? And making sure that we are changing hearts and minds, and people think about us when they think about a particular problem that they have.
Interesting. Yeah. And it definitely hearts and minds, folks. I think those are the key two words because so often it's just this sort of cerebral minds. And even in B2B land, that emotional connection seems to be more and more important. So let's talk about the primary role of the CMO.
We fuel growth. Really simple.
Okay. And that's interesting. When you say that, I mean, we're talking about in your case specifically for Monster, that means getting more jobs listed, more people searching for it. What is growth for Monster?
Yeah, so you just hit on one of Monster's primary challenges, which is I am a B2B marketer and a B2C marketer, right? And we run a platform, we run a marketplace, and when it's working well, we clear that marketplace because individuals, we call them candidates, are looking to improve their lives through more fulfilling work, and companies are looking for more productivity through better matched employees. Right. So ideally, we're doing both of those things. What's interesting is most of our marketing investment is on the candidate side, but all the revenue comes from the business side.
And it's interesting. My first client in the agency business was Century 21 Real Estate, and it was founded by this guy Art Bartlett, who had, just for you entrepreneurs out there, was failed with 3 different franchisees before he started Century 21, and he ultimately sold it for like $90 million or whatever to somebody. But he had a very simple approach, which was control the listings, control the sales. And that was it. So every agent, forget about worrying about the buyers. If you have enough sellers, you will do it. And so essentially, your formula of get the candidates to the website, everything else will happen. But it doesn't really quite work that way in your business, does it?
Well, I think of it a little bit differently. Get people to a website is pretty old.com, right? I think of it more as if a candidate believes that Monster is the place that cares enough in this category to help them find their next career move or their next job or their next gig, then we have love and attention to sell to our customers. And so I think of it more than it can't be that we're going to sell a visit or a click or an apply to a job.
Right.
We have to think of it as that love and attention and that belief that the candidate has that we are here to help in a category where very few people are there to help the candidate.
This is not a catcall. As you said, this is about really being part of the journey that these folks are going through in a very emotional time when you're looking for a job. Where it's certainly, it's often someone's life.
Absolutely. And that's, if we improve somebody's job, we absolutely improve their life. This is we are a mission. We are operating in an incredibly emotional category on the candidate side. It's more rational on the business side, and we are one of the original, mission-driven companies of that .com era, right? Like Jeff Taylor set out 24 years ago to really make people's lives better through more fulfilling work.
There you go. Okay, so what's your favorite part of the job?
So the most fun by far is still kind of the big campaign, right? The big reveal of you're putting new message out there. I love insight driven creative, right? Hey, here's the nexus between what a business can do and what the audience needs to hear to act, and wrapping a really fun creative shell around that and putting it out in the world. By far, that's the most fun.
It's funny because going back to our earlier conversation, that is the one reason why I felt I could never go client side, because I just didn't think that you would spend that much time on that and that your job is so broad. And think about how you spend your time. It's the most fun, but you don't get to spend that much time doing it, do you?
You don't get those days when new creative goes in market very often, but I would say that getting it right requires so many different pieces and parts, right? So if I think about all the voice of customer work that we do, or all of the work to get a better view of what's working and what's not working through data science and DMPs and attribution and all of the fun mechanics, all of that should be pointed towards that moment where you're buying your way into somebody's visual stream, right? You're renting some portion of attention, and you're saying, "Hey, pay attention to me. This is actually going to be valuable for both sides of the transaction."
So what's your proudest moment as a marketer? It doesn't have to be currently, just in your career.
Oh, pride. Let's see. Proudest moment. I've been really fortunate to be a part of bringing the campaigns to life. At Progressive, we did multiple challenge campaigns, some of which are still around, to challenge the legacy decade-old Superstore campaign. So both Baby Man and Box, I was a big part of creating those campaigns, which was a ton of fun. At Solar City, bringing life into something like Raw, which is a kind of a sad story because that campaign's not around and the brand's not even around anymore. But I actually think it could have been an iconic thing. So at the time, I was super proud of it. But I think probably what makes me the most proud is when we really stand up a team that works really well across all of the different disciplines in marketing. And I'd say we're only partway through it with the Monster transition. You mentioned me having about 8 months tenure. It takes a long time, but I've recruited a lot of people who I know we're going to form a great team and make a big difference.
So is there a renegade thing that you've done in your career that you can sort of share with the audience?
The most renegade thing in my career is just becoming a marketer at all. I have 2 engineering degrees, right? My first company, we went public in '99, and I was working here in California in Silicon Valley in the late '90s. And then for the next, I packed it up and went east and totally transitioned careers. And the reason is I was really frustrated with the box that engineers get put in. If I'm going to be part of an organization, I want to have a voice in deciding where that organization goes. And I really found that the marketing is a great way in, and also a time when marketing desperately still needs more scientists. And so that's kind of the most renegade thing, is to absolutely leave. And I remember talking to my friends at the time, and they're like, "What in the world are you talking about? Why would you leave this glory land of technology?"
Yeah, but I was wondering, because I was going to ask you this later, is because I did notice the engineering degrees, and that makes you 1 in 100 of the. I think I've had 2 or 3 interviews out of 200 of chief marketing officers that had engineering degrees. And does that affect the way you approach the job? And do you ever find yourself, the conversations that you have with other CMOs, you're looking at them and you sort of bring that more engineering methodical approach to your job?
Well, I'd say what I bring to my job is design thinking, right? Is constantly thinking about how a system can be optimized and how it can work better. I would say the piece that I've stretched into that I still have a ton of respect for and usually hire it out is that wrapper, that creative element of what's going to actually make something resonate in market. But that's just one of the design elements of the entire structure, right? And so I still look at it as a giant optimization puzzle.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. Do you think machines will ever be able to do your job?
Oh God, no. I think that we tend to overestimate a lot, and there's a lot of hype around whether super intelligence or the singularity is coming and we'll all be rendered useless. And we use a ton of machine learning and AI, right? And they're generally still solving pretty structured problems, right? Of recommend the right series of jobs to me, for instance. Figure out what the right bid is for this placement or for this audience. But when I really think about kind of the human element and to convince humans to do something differently or to think about a problem differently, I think we have a long way to go. It's certainly the next guy's problem, right? It's not going to be mine.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I have had a couple people when I've asked that question say, yeah, nope, it'll happen soon enough. I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I think that's a great place to start, unless there's like a book that you've read recently that just blew your mind.
We read a lot of books in my household. I have a couple young adults in my house, and I just encourage them to read one of my favorites, which is The Fountainhead, which is I reread it, and it's always good to, for the budding young adult who you want to make sure that they understand that you can build worlds. You don't just have to live in the one that you've been handed, I think is really important.
That's Ayn Rand, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
The other one I would throw out there is Factfulness, which is been published after he passed away last year by Hans Rosling's children, who were also his collaborators. And it's one of those books where you're probably familiar with a lot of the biases that we live with every day, but I think anything that provides some stories and anecdotes and shows the trappings of getting trapped in the same kind of group think that we're all seem to be wired for, and back to using facts and data to make sure that we are actually making the changes and decisions that we want to be made. It's really powerful.
Interesting. Okay, I want to get into that. We're going to do that in the next segment. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back, and my guest is Jonathan Beamer, the CMO of Monster. You just mentioned a book called Factfulness, which I know nothing about, but I just finished reading Clayton Christensen's The Creativity Without Luck or something close to that. And what was the interesting part, towards the end of that book, he spends a lot of time saying that no matter what data you have, it isn't as factual as you think, or because all data collection is based on a series of decisions that humans made. Whoa! So, which means that that you can look at data and say and draw the wrong conclusions because perhaps the data has been either aggregated incorrectly based on the assumptions of the people who did it. And he offered the example of the Google flu data. And so this was a case where Google does says that we're going to be able to tell where the hot spots are for the flu. And it turned out they wrote this algorithm and so forth, and it was completely inaccurate, even though it looked like it should be perfect. So anyway, what's Factfulness about?
So Factfulness is really about, Hans goes through the 10 instincts, which are really 10 biases, right, that we all have, that guide a lot of the decision making that we make. And it's interesting because I'm always encouraging our team to make sure that we are hypothesis neutral, right? That we believe something, right? And ideally, we even have a few people on the team who disagree, right? And then we kind of know the area that we want to test into, right? And so that's it's constantly being aware of the fact, because your marketing is never going to be optimized if you're just reconfirming a bias that you have, right?
Yes. And so for the listeners, I think one of them is confirmation bias, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's an episode of Two Bobs that goes right through all 10 of these in a very interesting and helpful way, particularly for marketers, so and agency owners, and that's one of their targets. So anyway, let's get to, speaking of confirmation bias, let's get to what you're doing. It's 8 months in or 9 months in, essentially, to your role as CMO at Monster. What are you feeling good about?
I'm feeling good about the team we put together. I'm feeling really good about where we know we have to go. And I'm feeling really good about the leadership team that's in Monster that desperately wants to bring back this classic, right? I mean, we amazingly, even though, and I think we'll get into about 10 years of neglect of the brand and the product and the technology that we bring to market. We are still the strongest brand, one of the strongest brands in the category, tied for or a leader, depending on how you cut the data. Again, one of those potential biases. But it's a great brand. It's based in this mission that people desperately want fulfilling work, and we know we have a place in people's lives if we get some of the things that we pay a little bit more attention to where we lost our way.
You know what's so interesting as you're talking about this brand, I'm thinking of Byron Sharp and how brands grow, and what it's, everybody knows about Monster. I mentioned that at the beginning of the show, and what a terrific competitive advantage that you have this. Here's this word that doesn't mean job searching, but everybody knows it means job searching. So somewhere along the line, it became etched in our minds, in the collective consciousness, and you have this tremendous sort of residual awareness, which today is so hard to build. But what you're saying is now we have to sort of convert that. That's a nice ground, nice place to start. But there's some issues to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've studied a lot of brands. I spent a decade on the agency side, and typically in kind of the strategy and analytics portion where we're constantly pulling apart brand metrics. I've never seen brand metrics like Monsters. It's what I've talked about as latent favorability, where once I remind you that Monster exists in this category, and not the energy drink, right?
Right.
Once I remind you, you like it, right? And like, who has that? Nobody has that, right? And so it is a huge strength, but people have forgotten about us, or people, even worse, some of our customers have stopped using us. Right. And so then but they're rooting for us, right? It is this amazing thing where in any other company, if somebody stopped using you and you say, hey, come back, they'd be like, no, man, that didn't work out for us. And with Monster, you just see the power of the brand, because it's like, hey, when you fix this thing, come back, because I can't wait to buy you again. Right. And so that's really, really powerful.
It is amazing. And I think it's funny because if it was jobs.com, it'd be very hard to have an emotional relationship with it. But Monster, early on with the Monster, it became a brand. It really did. And it got attached to values, got attached to it that were greater than the functional aspects of the brand, that's like heroic marketing some point along the way, right?
Absolutely. We also run jobs.com, though, I'll point out.
I'm sorry. I knew that was going to come back to bite me, but that's okay. And because probably jobs.com, when you search jobs, that'll be the first thing that shows up on Google. I mean,
it's certainly got some SEO value for sure. It's fun for us right now because it gives us a nice place to test things that maybe are a little bit riskier too.
Interesting. And that's really so. All right. So you have this brand with terrific residual value, but you've got some issues. So you have a team in place, and we've talked a lot about this. It's about building the team. But what needs to be done, and in both from a sort of message standpoint, and it feels like at least I read there was a lot of sort of marketing, ad tech, sort of martech stuff that you needed to get in place as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that we really took our eye off the ball, right, is most of the big brand advertising that is still viewed as is still remembered by people, right? Like we're talking about a 1999 Super Bowl spot, right? And that's the when I grew up, right? The brown noser, all of those. A lot of people remember that ad still. And you think about that, and you're like, wow, they're remembering an ad that aired 19 years ago,
Right.
And we advertised essentially until 2009. And then we really stopped, and we got really excited about some of the direct response, pure attribution. I spend this, I get this, right? And meanwhile, we still had we had tailwinds, right? We had the wind at our back because we had already invested a bunch of brand money in the brand, and so for a long time we could just coast. And the problem is when you're just looking at lower funnel attribution, and you're not thinking about keeping those brand metrics strong and what made them strong in the first place, you stop investing. And that's it. It was true in marketing. It was true in just some of our core responsiveness of our technology. And so those are the things that we are really dedicated now to bringing back and making sure that candidates have an awesome experience, and their preferences are matched to the best jobs, and our customers therefore see the best candidates in our product.
So I want to take another break, but before I do, I just want to, so this is fascinating to me because in the world of metrics and attribution, what I see a lot, and this is particularly true in B2B, is that someone who isn't familiar with the whole bit of marketing will look at the sort of last click attribution and say, well, geez, we should just spend all our money in search because look, or just on LinkedIn because that's all that paid out. They clicked on that and they bought the product, or they clicked on that and it turned into a lead. And obviously with long tail sort of business to business marketing where you have 5.4 people involved in decision at minimum, it's much more complicated than that last click at the lead. But what's interesting is you, in a sense, before you got there, this is a pure example of how that doesn't work, that you can lose what it really means to be a brand in the marketplace. And that is broad-based awareness on a time. You need the broad base to help ultimately drive the ongoing traffic, if you will. You need both of those things to work together. Now, it also sounds like there was just basic product experience issues here as well. So it's kind of like a double whammy. Not only was your marketing sort of in this sort of coasting, but the product might have been coasting.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to have a great brand without a great product, right? They go hand in hand, especially for a digital property. And so the line between product and marketing is really blurred at Monster. And it should be blurry, right? But that's where the other thing I'd point out is this category hasn't been aiming very high. Right. There's been commoditization in job search over the last 20 years. And frankly, the commoditization pivots around a model that Monster created 24 years ago, which is type in the job that you're looking for and type in the location that you're looking for it in. And here's a list of job search results. And that's a really dumb way to look for a job. And so that's where I get really excited because there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity to fulfill that mission, which is how do we really match the best talent to those opportunities that make sense for that talent, right? And it should be more than searching for a job title.
Okay, so hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say, marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content?
If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back with my guest, Jonathan Beamer, who is the CMO of Monster. And we've just talking about how, in many ways, the job search is not where it should be. We've been talking about it's almost inseparable when you have an online product to separate the marketing and the product. And I think that's really interesting. So as the CMO of Monster, how do you go about sort of saying, hey, I can drive some more traffic and I can spend money on awareness, but we need to fix fundamental aspects of the brand. And how do you, sort of help drive that process?
So the first answer is in the very traditional. I think a lot of your CMOs have represented that that I should be the voice of the customer around the table, right? And again, that customer is twofold. It's the candidate looking for a job, and it's the recruiter looking to fill the position. And that's the first piece. And so I've brought in a lot of. We have ongoing panels of both of those audiences where we can ask any question overnight and get answers. I've made sure that we're constantly looking at brand tracking results, and that we have a steady stream of data coming from real customers and real candidates on how we're perceived in the marketplace. But then more than that, there are really close partnership with our product team to make sure that we are creating insanely helpful experiences. And that's one where in the past, I think it's really easy because it requires technology to be focused on a particular element of the journey, right? So here is the engine that is the recommendation engine that matches, let's say, jobs and candidates. But that's just, it's one rendering of a page on a journey. Something upstream of that made that candidate come to Monster that day. Something downstream of that is going to, is that candidate potentially applying to that job, being nervous about whether or not they're going to qualify, get the interview, right? It is a very, that simple transaction that is spent where a lot of time is spent. We have to understand how small a portion of the overall journey it is, and so that's a lot of where I think marketing is really core and fundamental, is to make sure that we are bringing the bigger perspective of the journey that our audiences are going through.
So you mentioned ongoing panels, and let's spend a little bit of time on what do you mean, what are you doing there, what are you learning from that?
So we actually partnered with a company that we know really well in Boston called C-Space. They used to be Communispace, but and to make sure that we have a community of job seekers and of customers. So that let's say when we're building one of those experiences, we can test it out in a safe environment. When we just did a pricing test for a new product that we're thinking about, and it's incredibly helpful to get an initial data point. What's really fun then is when you put it in market and you see actually how accurate you can get with these sorts of tools. And we certainly have found that it builds more confidence within the broader team that we can experiment in a place where it costs a lot less than building out complete products before we get data back.
Really interesting. So these panels are people who've agreed to be interviewed, and these are all online interviews, one-on-one, multiple sort of, you send it out to your 100 people in the panel and you let them sort of respond to a particular experience?
Yeah, I mean, the methodologies vary, but we certainly, we have moderated panels, and then we have kind of classic surveys as well. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. And then, so that's an interesting one, and what that allows you to sort of quickly test things, which is sort of very much about design thinking, right? We get that thing to market.
Absolutely.
We fail fast. We do our sprint. We put it out there, and then we sort of adjust. Then you mentioned brand tracking, and I think I saw in your interview with someone early back that you used NPS and so forth. And I'm increasingly sort of finding that to be less and less helpful. It's a great sort of, we have a problem identifier. But it's not very good at saying why, how you got that problem and how to fix the problem. So what are you sort of, when you look at brand tracking, what are you hoping to see? And what's making it useful to you?
I love that question, Drew, because I think that in a lot of cases we get really hung up on the label that was in the question, right? And so Net Promoter Score is a good example of, well, we asked willingness to recommend. What does that mean? At the end of the day, it's just a data stream. It ends up being a dependent variable that you're optimizing to, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of pros and cons of the actual question, but I find that it doesn't really matter. I think Fred Reicheld's original book would say, "Hey, I picked that because it's correlated to future growth," right? Maybe, but if you can show what is any metric correlated to your financial metrics, right? Then that's where the real power is. So I don't really care what the questions in the tracking are. I care what the data scientists then say, hey, we can move this with these stimuli, move these results, right? And these results predict these other results. So Monster has the benefit of a tremendous amount of history. And frankly, there's a lot of variance in that history, right? There's times where we were doing really well and times where we weren't doing very well. So we actually have a pretty good idea of the types of activities that have driven those mid-level metrics. And when I say mid-level, something in between a stimulus and the ultimate response we want, which is ideally sales, revenue, candidate actions, those sorts of things. Those mid-level, they can really be anywhere from favorability to just pure awareness to NPS. And in many cases, it doesn't matter that much. But as a soup put together, when the stimulus you're putting out there is driving something that's good, that's a perception that ultimately will reward you with financial results.
Okay. I think I understand it. It's, number one, you got to have it. And number two, if the numbers are improving, that's generally a good sign. What's difficult is to sort of break that out and say, let's just take Net Promoter Score, and you start to see an increase in it. One would assume that was a good thing. But then you're saying that some of these other, whether it's favorability or awareness, you could start to see some sort of correlation between an uptick. And so can you get to the point where you can say, because I remember this in one particular tracking study for one of our clients years ago, there was a high correlation between when this went up and sales went up. Can you get that far?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We certainly see that when we have been spending the marketplace and our brand metrics are healthier, everything else gets better, right? And so conversion up and down the funnel gets better.
I'm telling you, you ought to get on the phone with Byron Sharp. You guys are like the perfect case for them to study. Because go ahead.
What's interesting about that is that's also why people miss the power of brand, because they're looking for it in one place.
Right.
And so I was talking to somebody who had put a very particular message into an advertisement that was an absolute home run, right? The advertisement went viral. If I mentioned it, you would remember the ad, but I'm not going to mention it.
Okay.
But they're like, yeah, but then this was the message, and we didn't see that activity increase, right? And I'm like, well, what the fuck? I mean, didn't you see everything else increase? Like, all of a sudden, people were talking about your brand, which nobody's done in a decade. Right. So how was that not viewed as a success? And so that's what I find is too often people are saying, well, I advertised this product on this week and the sales didn't go up that Friday of that product. And so it must not have worked. And that's where, we'll go back and look at everything else or have your longitudinal econometric model realize that you put $1 million of marketing in that week, and did they have gains that they couldn't explain? Because that's my other favorite is I've also had the performance marketers like, I don't know, boss, everything's going really well, I don't know what's going on. I was like, well, you do know we launched that brand campaign 2 weeks ago, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, we didn't, but that's funny. And so from all of this is where my mind is going racing ahead to you're spending more. When you spend more on advertising, and when you're a brand like Monster, it probably has to go beyond digital. I'm just going to guess because you have a broad target and you can't just get them all there. But when you spend money in advertising, you can see the results. However, if the product were better, the stickiness or the effectiveness of that advertising would be that much better.
Yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of the elasticity right now in performance comes from ensuring that we have repeat usage. That we have that I don't have to try and justify my marketing programs on a single transaction or a single session, because that's really hard to do, right? So, on the business side, that means when we acquire a customer, let's make sure that we have that's a trial, and we're immediately ensuring that people are using the product, ensuring that they're getting value from it, ensuring that the next position they post, they're also going to post with us. On the candidate side, it's there's lots of ways that I can monetize a visitor, but doing that by sending them somewhere else and having an account set up and preference gathering somewhere else destroys me, right? So that's where I have to make sure that we value those actions appropriately, even though with the thing that we're typically getting paid for is potentially, let's say, applying to a job, right? Maybe I could get there faster if I sent them somewhere else, right? Well, I have to balance that with the fact that no, Monster's the place that you want to build your profile, is the place that you want to be communicating to you about future opportunities. If we aren't valuing those things correctly, then we get too drawn down to the immediate revenue, and we aren't building long-term value for the firm.
Interesting. I was thinking about, as you said, building your profile. And I remember probably 10 years ago, I'd get a call from I went to Duke, and I still talk to lots of students. We have interns from Duke every summer. And often a student will sort of call me and say, something basic like, what's an account executive do? And I'll go, God, just go to Monster and look it up. They have a listing of every single job and every single career. And so that gets me to sort of, as we get to the close of this show, is what role does content play in all of this for Monster?
Content is huge, right? Content is king in marketing. And the behavior that you listed is still a major advantage that Monster has in the marketplace, right? We've got tons of job descriptions. We've got tons of history of those job descriptions, right? So there is nobody when they're posting a job writes the job description from scratch, right? Like I don't know whoever wrote the first one. It's a chicken and egg problem, because they're all ripped off from each other, right? You always start from something you posted before, and so that's a big advantage that we still have. I would say, we in B2B content means something different than B2C.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the breadth of data that we have and the breadth of experience we have, we still have some of the longest tail SEO content out there. But I think it's much more interesting if we are kind of taking that marketing as a service approach and ensuring that we understand a recruiter's challenges today. And so our content team just created a survey that actually looks at attitudes of recruiters, and it provides a basis for us then to go out and make sure that we are positioned to solve those challenges. On the consumer side, it's easier because our message load is very low, right? Like it's a very simple category. Everybody knows what a job is, right? Everybody most people want to be even more fulfilled in their career than they are today. And so content for Monster on the candidate side is, again, that kind of reminding people that we're around. We're back on TV since April, which I'm proud of, because it should be, and it has been, a productive channel for us in the past, and the broad reach nature of our product enables TV to really work for us. But those ads are really simple. We can do a lot in 15 seconds just to remind people, hey, on your mobile device, Monster will show you a bunch of jobs right now, right? So if you had a bad day at work, take a look, right? Download the app. And so those are the types of things that marketing doesn't have to create long-form content on the candidate side.
Love it. And, what's interesting to me is, and I've made this point in this show several times, is I can't tell you how many times it made me cringe in the last 10 years when people said TV was dead. And I've seen it at CMO conferences, and yet I find brands like yours, and I certainly know a couple years ago, I did talk to the CMO, Paul Darcy at Indeed, and TV is a big part of their brand too, and there's good reason for it, even though it does cost more, and even though it does reach less people, and even though there are cord cutters there, it is still the mass channel. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I was at Progressive for 4 years, and there are a few TV advertisers as big as Progressive. I competed against it a lot in digital. I've recommended against TV for a large portion of my career at Digitas. I can dispassionately look at the data at Monster and say this is absolutely where we need to be. Now, that having said that, we need to do it smartly, right? I also used TV in a very targeted way at Solar City, where we only wanted high credit homeowners and very limited geos. Right. And so now you're in a place where, you're IP targeting that video. Ideally, it's showing up on the living room TV when people are relaxing and receptive to a message. Right. But that's a very different form, because you're willing to pay high CPMs because you have to be targeted.
Right.
At Monster, we are released a little bit from that targeting because of the ubiquity of the product, right? Which is the same as car insurance or beer or financial services, right? Things that every household has.
Yeah, just about. Yeah. Okay. So as we wrap up this show and you look back at the first 8 months at Monster, what do you think are one or two or even three of the sort of key learnings, if we had a group of chief marketing officers here, that you would share based on this experience?
Oh, that's a great question. I think really one of the big ones, and it's especially true in what I view Monster is a turnaround, is pretty much everything in life starts with trust, right? And so we have you have to forge trust with your team. You have to forge trust with the executive team that we have, and which is a relatively a group of people that largely hasn't worked together, right? So you're kind of doing that storming, norming, and forming, and getting to a place where you understand the strengths of the different members, and you can trust each player is going to play their position. I'd say that trust is born from showing some vulnerability, showing some risk taking and willingness to really listen, and then be accountable for the things that you're signing up to and delivering on what you have said you're going to do. So that's the big one, and that's the it's a little bit specific perhaps to something that is truly rebooting, right? But I think it's very similar to if you were joining a startup, right? And you're going to pull that team together. And I've had a few different times where you get to create that team, and it really starts with being very direct, very honest, very open with why you're all together and what you're trying to do.
Well, I think it's relevant to just about any brand, because even if you're well established and you're riding high, right, with the number one position, you need to be thinking about rebooting, competing with yourself, because you know that a bunch of folks are, trying to compete with you. So yeah, the second part of showing vulnerability and risk taking, to me, the brands that suddenly play it safe are the ones who are really going to get taken advantage of, because that somebody is going to out innovate them and take a chance. So you seem to have one advantage with the jobs.com and some of the panels that you have, that you can take these risks on a managed level and then roll them out. But still, the notion of that trust is a word that comes up every day every recording of this show. There is no brand without trust. And I would argue that is the definition of a brand, is something that you trust in more than the generic. Right? It's, and you're willing to pay for it, or you're willing to engage with it because you're going to give them your time or your money. And you're not going to do that with something you don't trust. So amazing. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate, Jonathan, the time you've spent with us on this show. It's great to hear the challenges, the honesty that you bring to this challenge, and I'm sure that's inspiring to your team.
Well, I hope so, and I'm excited to come back in a year or two and show you what we've done.
I can't wait to see it. All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show. To my listeners, as always, I'm so grateful for the time that you invest here. We are trying to earn your trust with every episode. If you have comments or thoughts on how we can do this better, or guests or challenges that you'd like us to address, that would be awesome. If you just like the show, and do us a favor and share it with your friends, or write a review on your favorite podcast channel. So until next week, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.